Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining the webinar here today. We will be getting started in the next minute or two to allow for any last-minute arrivals.
What was that star I gotta push if I wanna say something?
I can hear you.
You can?
I'm not supposed to be able to hear you.
I cannot hear you. I cannot
You
hear.
can hear me. I can hear you. Oh, maybe because you're a presenter. Can you try not to butt in? What was your question?
They can hear you.
What was your question?
I'm supposed to be pushing star something if I wanna talk to everybody.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Lepore. I'm the sales manager here at Fortress Power. Thank you for joining the webinar today. I want to thank first and foremost R&R Solar Supply for co-hosting this webinar here today. I have a lot of very interesting topics I'll be covering here today, along with who we are and what we do here at Fortress Power, some sizing and selling guidance on selling batteries in this crazy world we live in, along with some other just design tips and tricks. I am recording this webinar, and we will be sending these slides out tomorrow. So don't feel like you have to rush and jot down any notes or anything, as you will have these slides following the webinar presentation. Should you have any questions, there's a question tab that you can ask questions. So please feel welcome to ask questions throughout the webinar, and I will be addressing them at the end in a quick 15-minute Q&A. So that being said, I am just going to get started. Let's do it. Few things on our agenda today here, everybody. First thing is we're going to be talking about why energy storage, what makes it so important and why it's such a rapidly growing industry. Then we're going to be talking about a little bit about company introduction, who we are and what we do here at Fortress Power. I'll then be going over our Fortress Power product line, some different battery options that we offer, as well as some sizing and selling tips. Always fun stuff. So without further ado, let's get into the nitty-gritty of why energy storage is becoming very popular. So according to a Department of Energy analysis that was for the year of 2020, they're expecting that by 2030, stationary deployments will exceed 150 gigawatt hours, and they're expecting a 27% annual growth rate for grid-related storage applications. You might be asking yourself, what is going to be the largest market for stationary energy storage moving forward? And oddly enough, it's going to be North America. So you can see here, this was also pulled from the Department of Energy report that in 2021, we're probably at 25 or so gigawatt hours. And by the end of this decade in 2030, we will be well over 100 gigawatt hours of stationary energy storage. So this is certainly a good industry to be in, as it's only projected to get more and more growth, especially as that dominoes and compounds into itself. Now, why is this? So if you guys remember 10 or 15 years ago and how solar first came to market, obviously the cost of solar has fallen over 20% in the past 5 years. And even in the past 15 years, we've seen a lot of development with solar alone. And even just the past 5, we've seen this price reduction. So we're seeing the same thing here in the battery industry. And by 2029, we're expecting a 46% price reduction in the lithium battery cells themselves. So almost half the cost by the end of this decade in the lithium battery cells. There's a lot of also new incentives coming to market. Obviously, the federal ITC tax credit, the 26%, was extended into the year 2023. And there's a lot of other different statewide incentives here, like the SCHIP incentive in California, the GMP incentive in Vermont, and there's other statewide rebate programs, which is why all across even just the USA, we're seeing a lot more battery deployment. And then last but not least, I think personally that we're seeing this growth in energy storage because of a shifting mindset. So I think the first thing is fear, oddly enough. If you think about, the terrible situation down in Texas, fear is really a driving motivator for people to consider using renewable energy sources and adding a backup to their home. And although Texas is probably the most recent example we can think of, the many hurricanes and storms, the once in every 500-year storm, that's not the case anymore. This is almost once a year, if not twice a year. And obviously between California and the fires, and then the storm in Texas and hurricanes in the Caribbean, this is really causing for a movement of having this idea of backup power. There's also very high emphasis on renewables coming in to the people's awareness, seeing that renewables are a very good option as we transition away from fossil fuels because of things like climate change and pollution, and some of those other really important factors that are really driving this emphasis on not only integrating renewables, but promoting them actively and making them available to the public. And then the last thing, but not least certainly, is the political administration change that took place this past January. So with the new political administration change, this is certainly something to keep our eyes on, as we're all expecting that this is going to push forward even more this demand and growth for renewables, especially with batteries here in just the 2020s, let's say. So between the battery affordability, with the prices of coming down like they did with solar, more incentives coming up on the federal and state level, and a shifting mindset of people, these are primarily the three driving factors for why batteries are now becoming a very, very popular commodity. So here are some benefits to using energy storage. Typically, you can use it just to back up your facility, right? Per NEC code, if the grid goes out, the solar panels have to stop producing. So you can use panels when the grid is off and you're keeping the solar panels running during outages. You can use it for self-supply, so installing PV and storage where the grid prohibits back feeding, no net metering, similar to that in Hawaii. And saving money on your electric bills, so charging the batteries at off-peak times and discharging them during peak times. This is primarily seen in areas like Southern California. However, I have heard that we are seeing this now here on the East Coast in states like Georgia and Delaware, and even up in Massachusetts as well. And the benefits, obviously, like I mentioned, there's a lot of taxes and incentives, or tax breaks and incentives that you can use for energy storage and solar. To go over some quick applications on how you can use Fortress Power batteries, you can use it in an off-grid application. Pretty straightforward there, no utilities, so you're using the solar and the battery as the main source of power generation. Next, you have it for backup. So this is where if the grid goes out over here, you're using the solar and battery to power the AC loads in the home. And then this self-supply application where you can purchase from the grid, but you're not allowed to sell back. So any excess PV goes into the battery or directly to the AC loads. So a little about who we are and what we do here at Fortress Power. We're a lithium iron phosphate battery provider focused on residential and commercial applications. We are headquartered in Southampton, Pennsylvania, which is around 25-30 minutes northwest of the city of Philadelphia. And we were founded back in 2016, and we're owned by a group of investment bankers and solar veterans. You can see here on the right, this is where I am now. This is our 30,000 square foot facility, which is where we do a lot of our research and development, sales and logistics. And we do have other warehouses in the continental US in California and Florida. Now, like I mentioned, this growth of energy storage is not just seen here in the continental US or even just the US in general, but we've seen installations and have had experience with installations in Canada, the Central Caribbean, South America, Europe, and even Africa. We are the exclusive lithium battery supplier for SEPTA, which is a local railway company here, and Hydro-Quebec, which is a Canadian utility company, in using our eFlex unit, We'll touch base on that later for a very interesting hydro application up in the northern parts of Canada. And some more about who we are at Fortress Power. We are approved with many of the different financing companies out there. So I'm sure you guys have heard of companies like LoanPal and Sunlight Financial, EnerBank USA, Lightstream, and Mosaic Finance. The reason why I want to mention this right off the bat is that I don't know a lot of people that could afford a $20,000 battery, hand over fist or cash. So feel welcome to use some of these different financing options with your customers should they need an option. I think LoanPal and Mosaic are probably two of the most popular, but certainly don't count out Sunlight Financial, Lightstream, or EnerBank, as they may have some better options or other options for your customer depending on their needs. So that being said, let's jump right into the product line of Fortress Power. So we have two main models that we like to promote, and it's our eVault 18.5 and our eFlex 5.4. The eVault 18.5 is an 18.5 kilowatt hour battery that can scale up to 12 for 200 kilowatt hours. You can see here it has an LCD display, which will show right on the front of that display the voltage of the battery, the current input and output of that battery at that time, the state of charge, and the power in kW. It has a very high power output, so that means you can power more AC loads with an eVault in comparison to some of the other battery options out there. This is due to the BMS in the battery, which I will be explaining the differences between different BMSs later in the presentation. This eVault is UL 1642 approved, and we are working right now to get this UL 9540 approved and tested. So if we move over here to our right, the little sibling of the eVault, the eFlex 5.4, this is our newest product. This is a 5.4 kilowatt hour battery, our more modular approach to something in comparison to the eVault. Some key features on the eFlex is that it comes with an IP65 rated aluminum enclosure. So this is very resistant to humidity, moisture, and dust, which means this can be outdoor installed. So keep that in mind, that the eVault is just an indoor rated unit, but you can certainly consider the eFlex for any outdoor rated installations. This has the latest cell-to-pack technology architecture, and it has data communication with many of the different inverters that we're compatible with, and the closed loop communication confirmed with the Solarc inverter and Schneider inverter. The eFlex has both UL 9540 and 1973, so these are readily available and can be ready to install with the proper certifications that you may need. So diving into the eFlex a little bit more, as it does have a lot of very interesting features that can be used for many different interesting projects. So I did mention the closed loop data communication with Solarc and Schneider, which allows you to have basically seamless integration between the battery bank and the inverter bank. This BMS also is a relay-based BMS, like I mentioned, and it provides remote monitoring of each battery pack, as well as single cell management and monitoring. The pack technology is a cell-to-pack architecture, and then I mentioned the IP65 rated aluminum enclosure means it is weather resistant. Interestingly enough, it comes with an integrated heatsink for 5 times better thermal performance, and it supports a supercharge feature where you can charge this in 15 minutes. Now, note here that with the supercharge feature in 45 minutes, that we would not recommend this every single time that they were going to cycle the battery or charge and discharge this. I would only recommend this for emergency applications, for example, medical equipment or something along those lines where this supercharge feature could be used in the event of an emergency. And the flexibility of the eFlex, it is a little corny, but the flexibility, hence the name eFlex, is really what kind of stood out for me initially when I learned that we were coming out with this product. So it can be designed for many versatile applications. So not only your typical home energy storage applications, but it can also be used for RV applications, telecommunication applications, computer server power backup applications, and railway applications. And since it is so modular, it's designed for a flexible installation. So because of the IP65 rated enclosure, this can be installed indoors or outdoors, or you can put it on the wall, on a floor mount, or even in a standard server rack. And this unit alone is stackable up to 15 units. So that's why I mentioned anywhere from 5 to 200 kilowatt hours is really the bread and butter in which Fortress Power thrives. Because you can get the eFlex 5.4 stacked up to 15 is 80, and then the eVault can stack up to 12 for 200 kilowatt hours. So moving on, another thing that differentiates us from other different providers is the type of battery cell that we're using in both the eVault and the eFlex. So there's three main kinds of cells out there. You have prismatic cells, pouch cells, and cylindrical cells. I think we all understand that cylindrical cells were certainly the most commonplace kind of cell for the last few years, but we are using this new prismatic cell. The prismatic cell is more of a square-shaped cell, meaning you can fit more cells in the same amount of volume in comparison to a cylindrical cell. So you can literally get more kilowatt hours in the same space. So not only is it more efficient in terms of your footprint of the cells in the battery, but they're more durable, they have better thermal stability, and they're a little bit longer lasting. Now, that being said, lithium iron phosphate manufacturers will tell you they usually recommend an 80% or 90% depth of discharge to get anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 cycles. We usually recommend to do an 80% depth of discharge for 6,000 cycles, as that aligns really well with our 10-year warranty. And then we have the pouch cells, which is typically seen in some other custom-made projects, from when I've seen them, at least in my experience. So they're not too popular. I usually see prismatic or cylindrical usually are the two main cells that battery providers will go. The reason why I mention this is it's good to know what kind of cells your provider is going to be using, whether it's Fortress or somebody else. It's always a good question to ask, as it is something that they should be able to disclose. And then I did mention that we have a more robust battery management system. The battery management system, in short, is the brain of the battery. So there is a MOSFET-based BMS, and then there's a Fortress Power relay-based, or it's a digital processor-based BMS. So the typical battery management system that you'll see, for example, with a MOSFET, can protect the battery from overcharging and deep discharging, overheating and low temperature protection, OCPD, and has that cell monitoring and balancing feature. Now, we like to take it one step further with the relay-based BMS, as it has all the primary functions of that of the MOSFET-based, but then it allows us to have that data communication, i.e. closed-loop communication with the different inverters, communications between units in parallel, the remote monitoring features, as well as being Internet of Things ready. So whether it's a relay-based BMS or MOSFET-based, they will certainly do the things that you want them to do to protect the battery cells and battery. But if you want all the other nifty features, let's say, the relay-based BMS is certainly good to know. And you can always ask your battery provider, what kind of BMS are you using, so you know what to expect when you're working with your project. If you're having a high surge load or X, Y, and Z, it's important to know the difference between the two. So I wanted to go over a quick design guide that we would recommend here at Fortress Power in terms of sizing some of our different battery options. So I want to just mention that there's two main kinds of projects out there. You have AC coupled projects and DC coupled projects. AC coupled projects is when typically you're retrofitting to an existing PV system. So I get a lot of questions, is Fortress compatible with SolarEdge? Is Fortress compatible with Fronius, let's say? The simple answer is it's not directly compatible because of the high voltage nature of those inverters. However, if you have a customer interested in adding a Fortress battery or a lithium iron phosphate battery at 48 volts, what you can do is retrofit a hybrid inverter in an AC coupled system to then add on our battery. So AC coupling is certainly probably more popular as of now. However, for true hybrid systems, this is where we're seeing the application for DC coupled systems be of benefit. So this could be for new installations. You don't need an additional PV inverter to make that frequency shift to 48 volts. And it is a little bit more efficient because you don't have that extra piece of equipment in there. So sizing starts off with determining, am I doing an AC coupled solution or DC coupled solution, i.e. am I adding on to an existing array, or am I building the array from the ground up? So before we jump into that, as you're determining an AC versus DC coupled array, here are all the inverters that we're compatible with. So you'll see some inverters that are probably recognizable on this list, like Solarc or Schneider, Outback, Magnum, SMA, Victron, Morningstar, and Midnight Solar. And like I mentioned, we do have closed loop communication with the Solarc setup, as well as the Schneider, and we're now testing with SMA. I've gotten a lot of good feedback on the Solark inverter, and certainly all inverters have their respective pros and cons, just like all the batteries have their respective pros and cons. So when picking an inverter and battery for your project, certainly peruse some of the specs of these different inverters, as they may have things that may work for one project, but they may not work for another project. And then we do have an energy storage sizing tool that helps you simplify battery bank design. So let's assume here that we're going to be sizing this for a backup application for when the grid goes off. We do have a proprietary Fortress Power sizing tool if you sign up as an authorized dealer with us, which I can give you access to once you sign up. I'll have more directions on that towards the end of the slideshow. But essentially what you want to do for sizing up energy storage for backup, pretty straightforward. You select the loads to be moved from the main panel to the backup panel, calculate that daily usage of said backup panel, select that proper battery bank size for the daily usage of the panel, and then you can estimate the daily available power and then the daily available load in congruence with that battery size that you have gotten. So typically we recommend here at Fortress that your battery is double the size of the inverter there. So for example, if you're using Solark, for example, let's say the 12 kW, we would recommend that the battery bank size be around 24 kilowatt hours. Now that being said, you can use the Solark 12 kW with just one of our eVaults, but at that same token, you would have to use 2 of our eFlexes or 3 of our eFlexes with the closed loop communication with the Solark 12. So sizing can be confusing at times, truthfully, but if there are any other questions, you can always email us after the fact or any design questions, and we can certainly help with sizing the project for you, or just get another set of eyes on it to make sure that the sizing is indeed correct. And then some other tips for selling storage, especially when there's so many different options out there and people may have different perspectives or different opinions on batteries. Here are some different keys to success. I like mentioning to use keywords like payback or security, safety, value, and longevity. And this really is a safe, tangible investment because power is more important than it's ever been. You know, if you would ask somebody 25 years ago how important, or even 30 years ago, how important power was on their scale of 1 to 10, it probably wasn't that high. But nowadays, power is more important than it's ever been. So investing in solar and solar storage is definitely a good investment, similar to that of investing into a nice car, whether it's an electric car or a hybrid car. It's the same kind of premise. Use different references and incentives. Use customer references. Word of mouth is a very, very good way to drive lead generation. And then you can use the 26% federal ITC tax credit and other statewide incentives. Some typical objections that I get, I always smile at the price objection, as that is probably the objection of objections. I like to always mention that the sooner you invest in something like solar and solar battery, the more that you'll reap the benefits of it. People will probably say, well, it's too expensive and I'll wait till the price comes down. And I like to mention that's fine, but the longer that you wait, the less that you're actually benefiting from investing here and now. So the I'll wait objection, maybe they just don't know enough about what you're kind of getting through to them in terms of information. So maybe it just takes another phone call to explain to them, listen, I understand you want to wait for the price to come down, but the sooner you do this, the better. And if now is not the time for selling storage because your customer is adamant they don't need it, then sell for the future. As always, you can install the battery or install the solar and inverter first and then have the battery after. At Fortress, we recommend if you were to put in, let's say, the Solark inverter and in a solar array, we would recommend that you put on one battery, and then after that first battery is installed, you do it within 1 full year of the installation. So there is no time limit from when you have the PV to the first battery, but from that first battery to the second battery, we would recommend that you do that within a year. Why, might you ask? It's because you want to make sure that the state of health and state of charge and voltage of the batteries that you're paralleling are at similar levels. You wouldn't want to have 2 different levels because it wouldn't be healthy for the battery bank as a whole, excuse me. So always realize that if now is not the time, you can always feel welcome to sell for the future. So here are some different case studies with Solark. I have a really cool online monitoring platform I'd like to show you guys as well. But before we jump into that, here are some Solarcs with the eVaults that we have, the Solarc with the eFlex. I think this was set up in a closed communication setup. We have the eVault over here, Solarc with some eFlexes. And as you can see here, a lot of these are wall mounted, but you can put it in a server rack hung on the wall as well. And you can see here the eVault is just a floor standing with wheels. So the eFlex could be certainly used for areas with a smaller footprint or an outdoor installation like I mentioned, but you have somewhere that's indoor where they don't want many small batteries but one large battery, then we'd probably go with the eVault in that case. Now, I want to show you guys an interesting platform that we've been using. This is the monitoring for the Solarc, and this is I think it's a 10 kW system. It's a 330 watt panels, and there's 6 of them with one Solarc 12 kW and 2 eFlexes. This is a mobile off-grid power station, which is powering some different loads like a refrigeration load and a Wi-Fi load. So really neat here how you can get, first, look at the overview. So you can see they're powering KW right now. And you can see what the weather's like. You have your plant information over here, and then live power flow from the solar array, and this is the inverter, the Solarc inverter, the battery bank, and then it's showing that they have loads currently going into their home, and they're not obviously selling anything or pulling anything back from the grid. So as we scroll down, we can see some really, really cool things. I love looking at the graphs and the stats and everything. So if you look at the energy generation for the month, you can see here that from 4, 5, and 6, obviously as they get into the later months, their generation isn't as high as their azimuth changes. But in these peak months, you can measure what the load is or the PV is in that particular month if they are exporting or importing here, as well as what they're discharging from the battery. So to even take this one step further, we can look at the equipment side. We can go to the battery, and then we can see that the eFlexes, they have 2 eFlexes, so they have 10.8 kilowatt hours total. You can see here that it's at 51% right now, and they're doing a charge on it. Looks like they're putting, always forget where to find the amperage, but it looks like they're putting 23.4 amps into this, and it can also give you a lot of other information like what is the power at a certain time of day, state of charge at a certain time of day, the current, and the temperature. And then as you keep using this and you familiarize yourself with something like this, or if you're adding on to your system and it has the Solarc monitoring, this will adapt to anything you add on it. If let's say the solar trailer is adding more panels or they added another battery, it'd be as easy as adding the system on, letting Solarc know that the monitoring is indeed with another battery, and then it would adjust accordingly so you can get all these live stats. Now, being outside of Philadelphia, this system is a long way from home, and you can see here that I'm getting very clean, very good monitoring on all the different information in here. Even generation purposes, I can get it for just the day. It's still a little bit early in the morning here for you guys, so you guys maybe aren't at peak sun yet, but very, very neat tool. I think this thing is one of the greatest things since sliced bread, where you can see the overview and then dive into each equipment, the output, the input, your battery, if the grid is doing anything at that time. And this is all something that you can find through Solarc. Start from the current slide. So that's the benefit of using something like the eFlex with the Solarc, is that you can set it up for this closed communication aspect, and then you have that live monitoring, and you can really show that to your customer and say, listen, pull this up on your phone, on your laptop, and you can see your battery live. Even if they're all the way out here in Philadelphia enjoying the cold weather, this is still something they can certainly do. So some other services that we provide here at Fortress Power, we have a hands-on management team. They're very active in the industry. I see them almost every single day, barring COVID and restrictions here. We have personalized client relations. We also can provide co-marketing support and leads, and we have design and installation support. So if there are any other kinds of questions for designing a new solar and storage project, or adding a battery to an existing project, or if it's your first Fortress install, feel welcome to call or email our technical support line, and they can walk you through commissioning your first battery, sizing your first Fortress battery, and everything in between. And we do have on-site technical support available, like I mentioned. Should you call and have questions on commissioning your battery, they are made available there. And last but not least, that is all I had for you guys. So we covered a lot of information today. Here is my contact information directly. My email is alexl@fortresspower.com, and here's my direct number. And then we have R&R Solar Supplies contact information over here with some other, our sales email, any other technical support questions, or warranty questions or registrations. Like I mentioned, we do have a 10-year warranty at 6,000 cycles. And I'll open the floor now for any Q&A, or I'm more than able to go back in the presentation of a few slides if we want to review anything else. So it looks like we have a question in here. Jake, how do I view images? Jake, do you mean on the app, or do you mean on the what do you mean? Oops. And then just as a reminder for everybody, this is the two products we have, the EVOLD 18.5 and the eFlex 5.4. Reach out. We are hosting a nice little promotion as of now. So please contact your rep at R&R, as we do have a nice little promotion, a little customer appreciation promotion on the eFlex unit. So make sure you contact one of the nice people over at R&R, and they can fill you in on the details and see if we can get you eligible. Jake, I'm gonna try and unmute you right now. And in the meantime, Brian, is there a three-phase solution on grid and off grid 208 480? So the solar converter can do three-phase. If it's 208 480, I'd have to honestly find out for you. I believe it is, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But you could use the Solarc in that kind of application. You would just have one inverter per phase. So you'd put three of them. Usually this is for larger residential, maybe some smaller commercial, but it's certainly a possibility. All right, Jake, where are you?
There we go.
Jake,
Okay. So yeah, I wasn't able to see any of the slides or whatever was going on earlier. But yeah, I just had a couple of questions in general. I had one based on, like you were talking about, I will be using possibly 1 to 2 eFlexes on a 12K Solarc, just based on the fact that people want to expand in the future and don't have enough to invest in the moment.
Right.
And in that circumstance, I was just curious. So with one of them, say, because I'll try the smallest possible, and then there wouldn't be the closed loop option, so I'd have to put all the parameters in myself, right, to make it operate.
I think in that instance, it would be a manual setting, and I think at that point, I would recommend just going with 2 instead of 1. At that point, I wouldn't want the customer to think that they can just stick with 1. That was something I'd be excited about. They start with 2 instead of 1, and that would work.
So I do have the only system I have in the coming up in the near future here. We've already got the equipment, which is 2 Fortress, the 5.4 eFlex, and in that case, the closed loop would work. You're saying?
Yes.
With 2?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's good. That makes things a little easier. And yeah, I do have things. This would be my first system. I actually ordered a couple for my mom's boyfriend, so he's got to put those in, but I haven't laid hands on any yet. I've just seen the shipment came in, so I've got a couple once the building permit goes through on a little farm structure.
Very good.
And then we'll be Probably
wanna
getting
say-
another one going soon after, so should be good.
And this is the setting guide that we have, Jake, for closed communication. How do I, there we go.
Yeah, I'm
So-
seeing something here.
Yeah, so I would pass this along to you, and this will basically give you all the specs that you would need for setting up your eFlex and closed loop communication with the Solark. So it has everything from your parameter settings, if you were doing it manually, and as well as setting it up as you put different batteries in parallel with the needed things that you'll need. The eFlex will come with this RJ45 cable, the bus terminator, and the pinout converter. So that will come into that. So I can send this to you when you get the batteries, or I can send it to you right after this call here. And then you can reference this as you're setting up your eFlex with the Solark.
Awesome. Yeah, it doesn't seem too hard. And in the closed loop scenario, if I hook everything up properly, it should just put in the correct parameters, right? As far as charge and discharge, kind of.
Exactly right. So the BMS of, let's say, the two eFlexes and the Solark are going to be able to recognize each other, meaning that when you do initially set it up for the closed loop communication, it will be able to read that and then adjust accordingly.
All right. So yeah, I don't see any issues. So I just got off of a webinar with Solark, so
Nice.
it's all kind of sticking. Everything seems like it's going to work just fine.
Perfect.
And yeah, I believe I'll have a few of these things coming up soon. So
Yeah, fantastic.
once I get my hands into it, I'll have a couple more questions, I'm sure. But
Perfect. Well, Jake,
I
always
imagine-
give me a call or shoot me over an email. Certainly glad to help.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, Jake.
Yep. Well, you have a good day. I think I got all the information I actually need.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I'm going to put you back on mute now and then open the floor up for any other questions. All right?
All right. Thanks a lot, man.
Cheers. All right, everybody, any other questions, anything else that I can go over? Jake brought up a really good point with how many eFlexes to the Solark you can set up in closed loop communication. So if you did, I know he mentioned one eFlex with one Solark. That's not something I'd recommend because that's it's a pretty beefy inverter with a very small battery. So you will be able to use one of the Solarks with two of the eFlexes in a closed loop communication. And then in that same capacity, you could use one of the Solarks with three of the eFlexes. If you guys can bear with me for 1 second, I have another sizing guidance that I'm going to pull up here on my desktop. You can bear with me all here for just a moment. And all of this information is on our website. So we have a minimum sizing standard. Bueller. And we do have this minimum sizing standard that you can reference. And here we have the Solarks with the product above. So the eVaults, eFlexes, 10s and 5s. The 10s and 5s that didn't go over, you guys, this is two of our older models. So I'm going to have you guys, I've been having you guys focus on the eVault and eFlex as the newest models, and they have the closed loop communication and a lot of those other features. So here, Solark 8, eVault, and then eFlex. However, please note that that's why I mentioned you could put two of the eFlexes on with the Solark 12. Just make sure it's in closed loop communication, and then you will be good to go. I would not recommend one. You can do two, but make sure you're using it with closed loop communication. That's all. And this is just on our resources, minimum recommended sizing standards. So this is always a good start, but if you have larger projects where the minimum obviously isn't going to be a good fit, then you can reach out to us or my technical support team and they can help. Okay. Oh, I got some more questions. Let me just see if I can. What in the world? There we go. Okay. Brian had another question. Can you talk about points when compared to Tesla and Generac? Absolutely. So The Tesla system, the main comparison I make there is with the chemistry of Tesla. Having cobalt is good, I think, in certain applications, like with their electric vehicles. You need a very dense battery to move the car from point A to point B. But in a situation where it's in or near somebody's home, that's where using LiFePO4 really has more advantages because it has longer life cycles, 6,000 cycles compared to maybe 3,500 cycles. And there is a much, much, much lower chance of thermal runaway just because we do not have that added element of cobalt. Now, Generac has a very interesting system as they've taken sort of how they have the cabinet and then you add more batteries in. That's similar to how something like this would be, where you have the cabinet and then you can add more storage on at a later date. We just would recommend within that year. And then Brian had another question, does Solarc have a built-in automatic transfer switch? They do have a built-in automatic transfer switch. I think it runs at 4 milliseconds. If you need a larger one though, I would reach out to them. They may know better about where to find a larger ATS. Let's say if you have a larger panel, a main panel, and things like that. But they do have one built in, but I would recommend that you go out to Solarc for anything larger for different projects you have. And Mr. Noble asked, how does Simplify advertise to 10,000 cycles? It's a really good question. Truthfully, it's a marketing tactic since we do use the same lithium iron phosphate chemistry. So what they're able to do is that they can say they have 10,000 cycles, but push comes to shove on the technicality side of it. This is assuming if they cycle 1 time a day, the battery is going to last anywhere from 25 to 30 years, which just really isn't realistic with how people would normally use their batteries. So what they'll do is they'll advertise it for 10,000 cycles, but once the 10-year warranty is up, then they won't give you any other cycles after the 10-year warranty. If you read their warranty letter really carefully, they basically say 10 years or 10,000 cycles, whichever comes first. And 9 out of 10 times, it's going to be the 10-year warranty because they're going to be waiting 30 years to get to 10,000 cycles, even if they were doing it 1 time a day. So really important if they are saying 10,000 cycles, okay, does this take into account charging and discharging rates, temperature? Does this take into account all these other factors? Because it definitely doesn't. Now, Fortress, we do 6,000 cycles. It's a more conservative number, but it's more realistic with how we expect people to use the battery, with how people are going to want to use the battery in congruence with our warranty. So that's basically the gist on the at least 10,000 versus 6,000 cycles of Fortress versus Simplify. Any other questions? So John's asking why cobalt lithium for cars is better. So me not being a chemist, I've understood it that cobalt is more energy dense. It's more energy dense and it can push more out because of that added element of cobalt in it. So essentially with cobalt being in a car, it's more energy dense and can move that car from like A to B in a smaller format with the same amount of power, let's say, pushing that car over. There's probably a more technical explanation for why cobalt's used in lithium cobalt's used in electric vehicles. I just am not sure of that, but I can find out if it's something of interest to you, John. And like I mentioned, these are available. Oh, a faster discharge rate. Yeah, John, I think it would be a faster discharge rate in addition to it being smaller footprint for like the engine. I would agree with that for sure. And like I mentioned, Rolf and the nice people over at R&R do have the eFlex there, and they do have some nice promos starting. So if you guys want to try an eFlex, if you're new to Fortress Power, I think now would be the time to do it, as they do have some pretty good promos running right now, just as an FYI. Any other questions? heard any. Jake, the new graphite battery. Good question. So I've heard something about a lithium titanate battery that's new. It's titanate is like the chemical inside of it. I know the only, not downside, but the only consideration to be made with the lithium titanate was that its charging and discharging was extremely slow. And although this titanate has a very long life cycle, it was a very slow charging and discharging. I haven't heard anything about the new graphite battery, however. Let's see, graphite. I'll take a look though, if you'd recommend it. I'm interested just to learn more from my own knowledge. Brian, so we're a privately owned company. So I would have to ask honestly my president if that would be a possibility. I do know that we are very bankable and we've been around for 5 years, and year over year we've doubled, if not tripled, year over year. So we have certainly seen a lot of success. Now, granted, I understand it's not the same thing, but I can ask and see if I'm able to provide that for you. I'm not entirely sure. You're welcome, Brian. So if there's no other questions, I know we're all very busy people here. So if there are questions, feel welcome to shoot me over an email. This is my direct phone number, so you can always shoot me a text or give me a call. We can talk shop on any of your projects or any other questions that you may have after. Like I mentioned, I will be sending out this PowerPoint and the recording of this whole webinar after the fact, probably tomorrow. So keep your eyes peeled. I will be sending this out, and in the meantime, reach out to myself or R&R with any other questions, comments, concerns. We're both very glad to help out. All right, everybody. Thank you again for joining, and have a great rest of your day.